somebody that you haven't met before or someone that you don't know. And I'm going to give you a couple of questions on the screen, and those are questions that you're going to discuss. I'd like you to discuss them 1 minute each. I've got my little handy timer here, which I'm going to ring off every now and then. When you hear the bell, if you could just switch, so you get a minute each, and we're going to do 3 rounds of that. Okay? Sounds good? All right, so let's go. These are the questions I'd like you to discuss, so I'm going to put 1 minute on the timer. That works so much better than my voice. Awesome. All right, please take your seats. How was that? Let's just shout out. What did you experience?
Well, I learned a lot about just another company in different industries further along in their transformation than my company, and just different perspectives.
Awesome. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else in the room? How was the actual experience? So not so much the content. How was the experience of actually just getting right into that kind of exercise?
It's great. Great.
Yeah? Yeah. Did you know the expectation was that when we switch pairs, you do actually go and find somebody new, but that can or cannot happen. So I'm going to pause on this for a moment, but let's just figure out why we're here. So how many of you are Scrum Masters? Quite a few of you. Any other roles? Coaches, facilitators that you would? Okay. All right. So typically, we're doing all of those roles in some shape, way, or form or another. So I'm going to kind of just club us under Scrum Masters, because this is what I think of the Scrum Master, and I think they need a lot more hands than this, because they're doing a lot. We're typically playing the mentor role, facilitator, teacher, coach, getting coffee sometimes. There's a lot of things that we do. So how do we know when to do what activity, or pick which tool to get our teams to interact and come together and have really healthy conversations? We essentially end up building out our toolbox, right? And we find over time, this thing grows. What I found over my almost decade in the Agile space is that tools that I found that I think are really trivial or very common, if I talk to colleagues or other folks in the same space, they've never heard of them before, and vice versa. There's something that's their go-to tool, and I've never heard of it before, and they're like, how come? You know, and it just seems like everyone should be aware of these things. So my idea behind this session was I'd like to touch upon several tools, okay? We are going to hit the very, very tip of the iceberg, because most of these different ideas and tools are multi-day workshops, right? So my thought is that if you can actually become aware of these things that are available to us, then you can go do a deeper dive and find out more about why we use these different tools and how they can be helpful. Okay. So these are the 4 areas I would like to cover. Like I mentioned, we're going to go quick because it's a lot of content, and we're going to try and hit an exercise on at least each one. So let's keep going. The exercise that we just did is part of something called liberating structures. Has anyone heard of liberating structures before? Okay. Has anyone done an open space before? A few more people. Okay. So it's interesting because I've been doing open space for about 6-7 years, and I didn't realize it was a liberating structure until maybe just a couple of years ago. So you may be using some of these techniques inadvertently and not even realize. So it's not so much about knowing what they're called. You may be practicing them already. So liberating structures, in a nutshell, there's a book on it, there's an amazing website on it, and there's also a free app available for it. It's 33, and I would say growing, ways of finding ways of bringing people together in collaborative ways around something that we called microstructures. So the one that we just did was called impromptu networking. Okay, so it's a breakaway from our typical icebreakers that we do, and you'll see right away you raise the energy in the room. There's really no formal interaction needed from a facilitator. You're kind of doing it on your own, and you get to drive the content, and that's the key. The idea is that we want to rapidly share why we're here, right? So what are the challenges we're running into and the expectations that we have? So that's why I opened up with those 2 questions that I wanted you to focus on. So you had some key points to discuss. And the idea behind impromptu networking is, what are you going to take back with you, and what are you also going to give to the forum that you're in? Okay, so it's a 2-way conversation from that perspective. And obviously you build new connections, especially if you start milling around and changing up your pairs. Okay? The core concept behind all liberating structures is microstructures, and there's 5 steps to it. Okay, so let's just talk about the one that we just did, impromptu networking, right? So if the first one is structuring invitation, which means that I'm inviting you to participate in an activity, what would that have been for the impromptu networking? Any thoughts on that? Okay, so that was basically me giving you the instructions, proposing the 2 questions, and saying, hey, come, I'm inviting you to do this activity. The second one is how the space is arranged and what materials are provided. So our space is pretty much, we've got tables. If we didn't have tables, that would be completely fine, but we've got a group of people in an open space. How participation is distributed. Can anyone answer that question? How did we participate in that activity?
All the same.
All the same. Equal distribution, right? Everyone participated equally. There was no hierarchy. There was no one person controlling the activity. Everyone had their own level of participation and how they were going to get involved. How groups are configured. What were the rules around that?
Pairs.
In pairs. In pairs. And then also you had the ability to swap out, right, as well. Absolutely. And then your final step, a sequence of steps and time allocation. How did that happen?
Well, the questions were up and you knew it was a minute.
Yeah, so I timed it, and I gave you kind of the little dings in between, and allowed you to kind of free flow and move on, right? So that is the core concept behind liberating structures. All liberating structures will have a microstructure behind it. There might be slight variations, but those are the 5 key steps behind liberating structures, all right? So liberating structures overall will allow you to have a lot of fun. I hope you experience that. You get to own the process, okay? I really, really suggest go look at the website, experiment with the 33 or more. They do take a while learning. However, you do not need to be an expert in anything. And that's moving on. Who's heard of training from the back of the room? All right, a few people, awesome. Okay, training from the back of the room, I'm going to introduce you to Sharon Bowman. She is a teacher, an author, a researcher. Her focus is on brain science. How can we make learning better, okay? What are the things that our brain does to help us engage better, be able to retain information better, and recall memory. And so she has multiple courses that you can attend to get certified in aspects of training from the back of the room. But we're going to hone in on one key concept around it called learning principles. And there's 6 learning principles called the 6 trumps. Okay? These will focus primarily on imagery, talking, writing, shorter time, keeping things different, and movement. Okay, I think I covered all 6, yeah. I'm going to go into detail on all of them, but just keep in mind these are learning principles. So it doesn't mean you have to use them individually. You can use them together. You will find you probably will be using them integrated into each other. So let's look at the first one. Movement trumps sitting is our first one. What are we saying here? That if we're able to move within movement, we're going to get more oxygen in our brains. More oxygen in our brain helps us retain more information. So we started the first exercise with some movement, and we were trying to push more towards pairing up and switching and milling around the room. That's part of that process. What you will also find as I talk through all the exercises that we cover, that we're going to try and hit up a lot of these learning principles as well, so that we can not only experiment with them, but we will also hopefully find that we can retain the information better as well. So the idea is that every 10 so we should participate in some kind of engaging activity, some kind of movement, even if it's standing up to provide a response. There are different things, like when we're shouting out, you could literally just do something called a popcorn, which is stand up and sit down. So you're engaging other muscles, and other parts of your body to get the oxygen flowing in your brain and helping you with the learnings. The next one is talking trumps listening. If I'm doing all the talking, and you're doing all the listening, who do you think is learning the most?
You are.
Yeah. Is that what my intention is? No. Okay. So we're saying that when we talk, we are able to retain more information, and that's why every time you provide some kind of learning concept, if you're able to have a short discussion after it, it's a second layer of helping retain that information. So if you're building a course or some activity around the learning principles, try to integrate every 10 minutes or so some kind of activity where you get people to talk to each other. that will again help reinforce the information that you've just put out there. Writing trumps reading. How many of you are note takers? Awesome, okay. So writing is the tool that helps reinforce our learning. So another option that you also have after learning or teaching a key concept is get people to write things down. Give them a moment to discuss and maybe do a fill-in worksheet. Exchange some notes and then jot them down, okay? Writing, again, reinforces the learning because, again, it just sends another pathway to our brain to memorize the information. Shorter trumps longer. So if I'm here doing a 60-minute presentation and I just have a bunch of slides, which I do have, but hopefully it's not just that, how engaged are you going to be?
By the beginning, fine, but by the end, I'm ready to go to sleep.
Yeah, probably not even by the end. I'm saying maybe about 10 minutes in, you're going to be like, OK, I'm not paying too much attention. So research shows our brain, for whatever reason, tends to zone out around that 10 to 15-minute mark. Okay, and if you've sat in one of those ongoing presentations, I know I have definitely done that. We're saying incorporate activity, whether it is the reading, writing, or different activities, every 10 minutes or so, because again, your brain is going to shut down because it's getting used to seeing the same information. It's got the same expectations of seeing another slide, especially when it's full of a lot of text, which I apologize for. Your brain is going to zone out. So try and chunk the information and incorporate activity in the middle. Different trumps the same, or different trumps same. What we're saying here is just similar to the example that I was just giving about PowerPoint slides. If it's repetitive information, it gets boring. Okay? The brain is designed to lean towards novel information. If there's some emotion attached to it, it's even more interesting for the brain. It's going to like, hey, I want to pay attention here, okay? The same old thing is just going to make it zone out again. So try and engage in different ways, whether it is through activity or different conversations, but keep things different. Even if you're doing a lecture and then some activity and then a lecture again, that consistently may not be too useful either. So try and change up those activities so it's quite different, okay? Images trumps words. So if I give you a photograph and I say, hey, this is a photograph of me on vacation, does that give you a full story?
No.
Probably not, right? So while I give you images, I may need to give you a story as well. So images may not just be visual imagery. It could be stories. It could be anecdotes. It could be a variety of different things. But what we're finding is that the brain seems to have unlimited capacity to retain imagery in long-term memory rather than writing. So if you can get folks to like sketch things out, draw things, graphic organization, that's much more useful, and your brain is likely to retain that as well. Okay, so those were the 6 trumps. Let's try some, okay? So I'm going to ask you to get up and pair up with the person sitting opposite you. So we're going to introduce some movement, okay? And let's just see if you can recall the 6 trumps and how you might be able to apply them. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. How was that experience?
Cool.
Yeah? Do you still feel engaged and ready to keep going? Yeah, got some oxygen flowing to our brains? Nice, awesome. Okay, the next one I want to talk to you about is mapping techniques. So mapping techniques are considered graphic organization. So we talked about taking notes, right? Using them as a writing tool. Another good way of doing it is visually as well. You may have even seen at some conferences where you have live sketch artists and they're kind of sketching out the whole conference and talks. That's one way of graphic organizing and capturing visually, right? So mapping techniques, there are a multitude of them. So I would definitely say research these. The ones that I'm going to hit on are very basic, are great ways to visualize information, collaborate, brainstorm, but also quickly capture the context of an idea without getting too much into a narrative, right? Sometimes it's hard, we get caught up in words, and we lose sight of the goal sometimes, right? But having it out on paper or drawing it out, sometimes you can just point to it and say, you know what, that's the piece I'm talking about. So let's just talk about that a little bit more. The first one I want to talk to you about is mind maps. Anyone familiar with mind maps? All right, a few more, awesome. Okay, so mind maps are, in my opinion, as simple as you can get when it comes to mapping techniques. Okay, this is also a great way to switch your note-taking from writing to imagery, right? So incorporating one of those additional learning principles to help you retain the information better. You can get as creative as you want with mind maps. You can draw, you can color, you can put additional comments, however you want to break it out. There is no set way to do it. The idea is usually you start with a central topic, and then you just keep branching out from there. How you branch out is completely up to you. We really want to accommodate your creative flow and let all your ideas just get out on paper. So for that, we're going to try it. You have flip chart paper on your table. As a group at your table, I'd like you to think of Agile Arizona. Why are you here today? What are your expectations? Anything you think that's going to happen for the rest of the day? Start mind mapping that. Make Agile Arizona your central theme and see where it goes. Okay? I'll give you 4 minutes for that. If we take a step forward with mind maps, this I mentioned already that you can already use colors, images, enhance your mind map. You want to start with the central theme. But taking a step forward on mind maps, this particular activity would be great to use in meetings and to brainstorm. But what about when you're trying to bring team collaboration together or encourage team collaboration? There's something called personal maps, okay? This is one of my personal maps, and I didn't even realize this thing was called a personal map. So what I like to exemplify here is that these come very natural to us. So in 2017, I think I was on a flight back from London, and it was probably just right after New Year's, and I was like, oh, okay, what am I going to do this year to take good care of myself? And I was like, self-care, yeah, everyone's talking about that. So I got my little notebook out, whatever I had in my bag, and I just started drawing. I'm also trying to sketch better, so I was like, perfect opportunity to experiment with that as well. And I started putting out my self-care ideas, and it turned into a personal map. And it wasn't until very recently that I discovered that there is such a thing called personal maps, and you can actually use that as a really great tool for team collaboration and team activities. So it doesn't have to be about self-care, but it's great to get to know other people. Obviously, you want to allow the space to be safe, where people are comfortable sharing the information. So definitely, kind of lay that out for folks. But if you've got a new team that needs to know a little bit more about each other, this is a great way to say, hey, let me draw a personal map about you or what my thoughts are, and then discuss that. Or, hey, let me draw my own personal map, and then I'm going to share it with you. So there's some variations on that. There's more details on how you can do these on the Management 3.0 website. So I've got a link there, and these slides will be shared with you guys, so you'll have those. But what I really do like about this is it comes very naturally, and it's a great way to just kind of let ideas flow. The third map that I'd like to talk to you about is impact mapping. There's a whole book on this, okay? So this is what I meant by we're just going to kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. Impact mapping, when you have some goals that you're trying to achieve. How many of you try to break down a big goal into user stories? Or help your teams to do that? How challenging is that? Very challenging. So this is a really cool way to take a big idea or take a goal and start breaking it down. So here's where you would start. The idea is that you start with the goal, and then you break it down into further categories. So the first column is the why, that's your goal. Then you outline as many actors as you can. Actors meaning who are the different people that you're going to have interactions with. And these could be people that you're immediately working with, your users. It could be people that are administrators or even within your team developers, right? So list out as many actors as you need. What is the impact you're trying to achieve by working on this goal? Start listing all those out. And then what are the deliverables? What are the things that you're going to create that will help you achieve the goal? If you do a brainstorming session around this, we're going to very easily get to user stories, which I'll show you in a moment. But before we do that, I'm going to have you try it. So you have more flip chart paper under the one that you just had. These are the UN Sustainable Goals. So I'm going to give you a minute as a table to pick one of these, and then we're going to get into the exercise. So really quick decision making here. Just pick one of these at your table. So number 1 is no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger. Number 3, good health and well-being. Number 4, quality education. Number 5, gender equality. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. Number 7, affordable and clean energy. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Number 10, reduced inequalities. 11, sustainable cities and communities. 12, responsible consumption and production. 13, climate action. 14, life below water. 15, life on land. 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And 17 is partnerships for the goals. Okay, so you should have a goal by now. If you haven't got one, just pick one or just come up with something close to it, and let's get into the exercise. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes to actually create the impact map.
Well, they were like I think so. Health and
Well, as you can clearly see, this isn't an exercise that you can do in 4 or 5 minutes. This would typically be a half a day or a day's group session that you would do, but it would really help you get to the crux of things and really figure out why you are trying to work on a particular goal. And to get to user stories, you could literally just carve a path through those different columns. And then you can end up with your template of, as a user, I would like to so that I can. Okay, so it's a nice technique to get people to collaborate, talk about the actual goal. Often I've seen teams will discover the goal was wrong. So very early on, they can figure out, you know what, we're on the wrong path. We should do something else. So it's easy to kind of identify those kind of cracks in the way forward, but also just get good ideas to get to what it is you're trying to deliver and the impact that you're trying to make, because that's super important. Okay, so that was all our mapping techniques. I'd like to now talk to you about some qualities that a Scrum Master or anyone in kind of the Scrum Master role should have in an ideal situation, but also the qualities that you're going to try and pass on to your teams and encourage within your teams. There's 1,000 of them, I would think, but there are a few that I like to focus on. As we get into this section, and I could have offered this very much earlier on as well, but I think there were a lot more the activities were a lot more engaging, so I didn't have to worry about it too much. But always offer your teams the right to pass. Is everyone familiar with the right to pass? Okay, we're just basically giving you the option to opt out. So if you're uncomfortable participating in a particular activity, or you don't want to talk about something, no pressure, you just keep moving on, or the person can actually say, I'd like to pass, and that's completely fine. Okay, so I'm putting that out there because we might be talking about some deeper concepts here, and if you don't want to participate in that, that's completely fine. So we have the right to pass. These are the qualities I'd like to talk about. I find they all kind of interact with each other. A lot of them fall under the EQ bucket. I think they're super important. Qualities like learning to read the room, knowing what's going on with your team without engaging too much, especially if you're kind of sitting back and allowing the team to kind of take the reins and move forward, allowing them to self-organize. You want to be able to see that the team has everything that they need and where you can support them from this particular role. So like I said, there are 1,000 other qualities that we can focus on, but I find that these are really important and these keep recurring. These come up over and over again. And where I see Scrum Masters and coaches be much more successful is when they've kind of looked into this area a little bit and started adapting some of the qualities from here. So in brief, let's just talk about those. Empathy. So you'll find as we talk through some of these topics, there are many schools of thoughts on this and a lot of research, and it's still quite new topic-wise and in research. So you're going to find a lot of information out there. This is the one that I like on empathy, that there are 3 levels: cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. I'll go into a little bit more detail on those, but I want to emphasize that empathy is not sympathy. Okay, anyone want to take a shot at what the difference is there? I'll go here and then here.
Empathy is being able to identify what they're struggling with, but not emotionally invested in.
Okay.
Sympathy would be you're emotionally invested in.
Okay.
Sympathy would be where you've experienced something and can relate, and so your feelings come from that. Empathy is you're imagining what that might be like and trying to get there. So you're still having this connection and relatability, but it's not from personal experience.
Okay, so when I talk about empathy, you'll see that what both of you said is definitely along the right lines, but there are levels of empathy, and you'll find how they can vary and where we might pick or choose one over the other. The other element of empathy is that we don't want to be reactive. Often we're like, oh, hey, I can help you fix it. Right? That's not what we're here to do. Empathy is sometimes just being there for folks. And the key aspect of empathy is not all empathy is the same. So as we talk about these 3s, I hope that will be highlighted, but also create space for you to kind of dive deeper into the topic. So let's talk about cognitive empathy. This is where your brain is more engaged, your intellect is kind of on the forefront, and you're really trying to help solve a problem. So think about the doctor. When you go to the doctor's office, you've got the flu, and they're asking you what your symptoms are, okay? If they're probably using cognitive empathy at that point, because they're questioning you on what your symptoms are. Do you have a runny nose? Do you have a sore throat? Do you have a temperature? Those kind of things. They're not really asking you, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling cold? Or maybe they are asking if you're feeling cold, but about your actual emotions, right? They're typically not asking you about how you're feeling. So that's the difference there, right? So they're more focused on solving the problem. The downside to just using cognitive empathy is sometimes you could come across a little bit cold because you're just so focused on the problem, you may miss a lot of other information. So you want to be a little bit careful there, but it's really good to kind of use cognitive empathy when you're trying to incorporate diverse opinions, trying to problem solve, kind of be effective in running a session or making a team collaborate. So there's positives and negatives to it, so it's important to know kind of when to use it. On the flip side, you have emotional empathy, okay? Emotional empathy, this is when you're like, I feel you, right? Like when you really get into the feelings. There's different layers of this as well. Again, all feelings are not the same, right? Think about, let's talk about sadness. So let's say you've come home from a hard day's work, right? And you're just like tired, you've had a frustrating day and you may be feeling sad. That's a different level of sad to, let's just say, your puppy passed away, right? That's a different level of sad. Let's talk about happiness. It's Friday. I want to go home. Had a tough week. I'm happy. I can go get a drink, okay? That's a happy, right? But what about the level of happy when your sister gets married or the birth of your child or something like that? That's a different level of happy, right? So empathy is going to be at different levels as well, just like that, right? So it's important for you to recognize that. And part of the actual process is to recognize that, which I'll talk about more in EQ. The other element of emotional empathy is there's something called mirror neurons that we have in our brains. Mirror neurons, just as human beings, as animals, mammals, we have mirror neurons which basically mimic what we see. So behaviors, body language, actions, when we see those, we're very inclined as human beings to repeat those and mimic them. So when we see a child just tripped and fell over, scraped their knee, and they're crying, they're bawling, okay? You feel for them, you're like, oh my God, are you all right? Let me give you a hug, right? Those are the kind of things that we do. And this is very emotional, so this is kind of very heart-focused, right? It's great, but it can also be draining, so be careful, okay? Because you're really taking on a lot of feelings from other people and trying to keep yourself in check as well. So again, you need that balance, which is basically the third empathy, compassion. This is the ideal empathy. This is trying to strive a happy balance between the two. We're not saying you're going to, one's better than the other. We're saying how can you bring them together and find out when to use them and what's the appropriate time. And this is information that you have that can help you with building better relationships and working with people. So this is thinking kind of both with the heart and the head is how I like to think about it. So let's just say you have a friend got fired, comes to you and say, I got fired, what am I going to do? I need to pay the mortgage next month, right? You may go right into solutioning, right? Like, hey, I have a friend, I can, hook you up or I can get you an interview. Or you may just say, hey, wait a minute, let's go out, let's talk about this. How are you feeling? Maybe give them a hug, right? That's kind of trying to find what balance you need there. So this is the empathy we strive for. I have a video here that I wanted to show you. I just want to check on time. I think we're short on time, but I'm going to see if I can run it really quick, and maybe I'll show about 30 seconds if I can get it to work. Nope. Okay, I will include the link to this video. It's amazing. I think it portrays empathy in the best way possible. I want to talk about EQ really quickly. We're going to do a quick exercise on this. So you've got index cards on your tables. Grab an index card, grab a pen. We are going to move around the room, so we're going to do this kind of fast. Okay? I'm going to give you a minute and some instructions. You're going to walk around the room, and you are going to avoid eye contact with anyone you walk past. If you see people and you lock eyes, quickly look away. Okay? I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Okay, time's up. Take a quick moment to just jot down your feelings on the note card. Okay, the next set of instructions, we're going to do the same thing. This time you're going to seek eye contact with people you pass, but as soon as you make eye contact, you're going to break away. Okay, pause and just jot down your feelings. Okay, last round. I'm going to do it one more time. This time I'd like you to make eye contact. When you make eye contact, pair up with that person, stand side by side with them, and don't make eye contact with anyone else. If you're comfortable sharing, does anybody want to shout out how that experience was for them? Awkward. Normal. Ah, that's interesting. Anything else? Overwhelming.
I'm 4'11", and I just couldn't see it.
Okay. Yeah, so you're going to find that this is going to be different for different people, right? So like I was saying, these things will vary for different folks. Empathy, EQ, things like that are very unique to each person. They kind of make up your own kind of stamp. So be mindful of that. Don't have the same expectations from each other on how they may be empathizing, how they may be feeling, things like that. These elements can change and grow over time. And practice makes perfect. So if you become more mindful about these things, they come more naturally and you become more aware. To close out EQ, there's 4 pillars. There's different versions of this as well. These are the 4 pillars I like to focus on. Self-awareness. Actually, let me just back up one second. Self-awareness is when you realize your emotion in the moment. You realize you're about to get angry, or you're feeling sad, or you have fear, or you're getting really happy, right? And just kind of recognizing the emotion in the moment. Research shows you have about 5 to 6 seconds to make a decision on how you're going to react to that emotion that you start feeling. So the second level is self-management or regulation, right? How are you going to deal with that emotion? If you're angry, are you going to act out on it? If you're happy, are you going to start doing jumping jacks? How are you going to react to that? Social awareness is understanding what other people's emotions might be going like. So basically, observation, trying to understand what's going on around you. And then the interpersonal management is basically how do you take all that information and take the next action. So it's not only yourself, but also externally as well, right? And taking all of that data, because that really is what it is. Emotions are data. And if you're able to kind of get those under your belt and recognize them in the right moment, that's pretty powerful, and it just helps manage relationships and collaboration and things like that much, much better. So that's EQ in a really, really small nutshell. Self-awareness, I'd just like to dive a little bit deeper and say, it's not just about self-awareness when you think about awareness, it's about awareness around others as well. So really, as you're practicing awareness and EQ and things like that, be mindful about also what's going on around you. Address your blind spots, okay? Very often we think we're doing the right thing and we're very, very aware, and we know that, you know, we have the best of intentions, but sometimes we do have our own blind spots, so just be aware of those. I think are we almost out of time? We are out of time. Okay, I'm going to send these slides over to you. The last piece that I had was just listening actively. There are 3 levels of listening, but it's really when you listen to speak, right? So when we're very reactive and coming out with a response, when we're listening to hear, so what the other person is saying, and then when we're actually listening to understand. Okay, so there's 3 levels of listening as well. So I will send these slides out to you guys. I'm sorry we couldn't get into that final activity. There's a couple of videos in there. I'll include those as well. I think the last thing I need to announce is just feedback. Actually, in closing, I'm going to say, stay curious. Okay, this is continuous learning. I know that was a lot of different activities. I hope they were interesting enough for you to go dive deeper. But now in closing, I think I need to make an announcement about feedback. There's feedback forms on your tables, and also you can use them on the app. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.